Boys and girls, it's Storytime with Mrs. Clyett. Today we're going to be discussing Dog of the Sea Waves, which is in your second ELA packet. I hope that you have enjoyed reading this story, or if you haven't read it yet, that you will enjoy this story. Um, if you'll think back to stories that we've read before, or at times when you were reading books, and sometimes you would think, I'm not so sure about this book, and we would talk about how we've got to give it a chance and don't judge a book by its cover. At first, I wasn't so sure that I was going to really enjoy the story. But once I gave it a chance, and by the time I got to the second or third page, I was totally hooked. So I hope that you will be too. The story has a great theme. Okay. All right, so starting here on page 272, you get an introduction of the characters, that there are five brothers who explore the Hawaiian Islands. Manu, the youngest brother, saves the life of an injured seal, and the two become friends. When it's time for the brothers to go home, Manu is unsure if he'll ever see his friend again. So, boys and girls, this really gives you an idea of what the story is going to be about before you even start reading. Okay, just by studying this illustration, you can tell that this mountain obviously is a volcanic mountain, because you can see the smoke and lava coming down the mountain. Okay, you have your introduction, and then you get to see a picture here, or illustration, of the brothers. Boys and girls, this is the page where you first start to really learn about Manu, and he is the main character in the story. We can tell that Manu is not excited about being here on this island. I know that because he says, "New things," Manu exclaimed. "I miss the old things. Where are the coconuts, the bananas, the sweet potatoes? And how about the pigs, the chickens, the dogs?" So this lets me know that he really misses his home. His brother goes on to say, "We'll go home and bring these things back here with us." So they're exploring this land to venture out and figure out what all the land has to offer them here. But they plan on going back home, getting their things, and then coming back to this new land. "We're coming back," Manu cried. "I don't want to come back. I just want to go home." So from here, boys and girls, we can tell that he is very unhappy with this new land. He's homesick. He wants to be back home. He doesn't have a very positive attitude about being here. And then the next day, he discovers this injured seal that he ends up naming Dog of the Sea Waves. His brothers are not very interested in the seal. It says the brothers left Manu. They had no time for an animal that was going to die. They just thought, this animal's going to die. We don't really have time to be trying to take care of it. They had to prepare for their long sea voyage home. But the animal didn't die. And it goes on and it tells you about how Manu took care of him. He fed him. He nursed him back to health. And just by looking at this illustration, you can tell that he enjoys spending time with the seal. And then it goes on, the boys, or the brothers, are working hard to get their sail fixed on their ship or their boat. They're all working hard, and Manu is having a good time playing with Dog of the Sea Waves, which was the seal that he nursed back to health. So you can sort of see the playful side of Manu here. It says that every Every evening after his work was done, he slipped off to meet his friend, and they played in the waves until it got too dark to see. Then Manu swam ashore, and Dog of the Sea Waves went hunting for food. So he and the seal have become very good friends. And we can also tell that now his attitude is changing about being here on this new island. He's enjoying being here more now because he's made a new friend. Okay, they fix their boat, and apparently they are becoming inquisitive as they're sailing around the islands. They discover that on one of the mountains, it appears to be, or on one of the side, on excuse me, on the side of one of the mountains, there appears to be smoke. Opua said, "Is that a cloud on the side of that mountain or smoke? Let's go see." So they're becoming inquisitive. They're curious. So they decide to anchor their boat, and then they climb up the mountain. But as they're climbing up the mountain, it becomes warmer. And Makani, one of the brothers, starts to hesitate or kind of hold back. He's not so sure about continuing on. He probably senses that there's danger. Then it goes on to say that Manu noticed that the birds were silent. And if you remember at the beginning of the story, it tells us that Manu loved birds, but his brothers paid no attention. Then a jolt. Okay, and you can tell by the expression on his face that something is definitely wrong. Okay. It says the earth heaved up and slammed the brothers to the ground. Deep cracks appeared, then flames. So at this, boys and girls, at this time, boys and girls, what do you think is happening in the story? That's right. Obviously, the volcano is erupting, and it's possibly even causing maybe an earthquake. Everything is in upheaval at this point and very dangerous. It says the earth shuddered and the five brothers jumped into the sea far below. So if the lava's coming down the mountain, they probably have no other choice but just to jump into the sea or into the water where they could escape from the heat, the hot lava. But the sea they landed in was a monster. Was a monster. Gosh, what does this remind you of? A comparison. The sea is being compared to a monster. That's right, a metaphor, boys and girls. This is a metaphor, but the sea they landed in was a monster. What does that mean? That must mean that it is really scary. The waves are thrashing. You can tell that they're having a hard time trying to stay afloat in the water. It's not exactly like swimming in a calm sea. I'm sure that they were very scared. You can even see the look on Manu's face over here that he's scared because of the waves. He's getting tossed under the tide or below the water. It says Makani filled his lungs with air and went to the very depths of the ocean, but there was no sign of Manu. So they are really worried about him. It says in an instant he was gone. So we know that those strong waters pulled him underneath. So at that point, they were concerned about him drowning. All this time, Manu was fighting to get to the surface, but the sea wouldn't let go. Then he felt the whiskers. Manu clasped his arms around Dog of the Sea Waves, and up they went. Boy, at this point, I don't know about you, but I was relieved to know that basically his pet seal, or the seal that he had become such good friends with, was now saving his life. His brothers now were very thankful that Dog of the Sea Waves saved their brother. They even come up with a chant: dog that swims the depths, dog that braves the currents, dog that knows the sea, dog that cares for our brother. And to them, boys and girls, they don't really understand that he's actually a seal. They just know that he's Dog of the Sea Waves is similar to a dog because of his whiskers and the way his head looks, but he actually has the fins of a fish. So that's why they refer to him as Dog of the Sea Waves. And you can see Dog of the Sea Waves here, and you can see the brothers on their boat over here. And they're shouting, "We'll be back," or Manu shouted, "We'll be back." And when they returned, they came with their families. They embraced the land and made it their home. Boys and girls, where you see the word here, embraced, that really means that they just took good care of the land and made it their home. This became their new home. Okay, so let's go back now to our packet. Let's look at number 1. The directions were to review your target vocabulary words on pages 270 by rereading the context clue cards on pages 266 and 267. Now remember, these are the words that you just made your own vocabulary cards for. Okay, I went ahead and I filled in some of your story map here that you're using to retell the story. The characters were Manu, Hoku, Naali, Opua, and Makani. Now, of all of the characters, of course, Manu would be the main character. He's the one that has the problem in the beginning of the story and at the end of the story. He's the one that takes up the time to heal or to help nurse the seal back to health. The setting is where the story takes place, and of course it was in the sea and on the shore of the Hawaiian Islands. Boys and girls, please be specific when you're answering these questions. For the setting, it would not be appropriate to just write ocean or sea. You'd want to be more specific and give more details. In the story, it tells us that the story takes place on and around the Hawaiian Islands, so we need to include that in our answer. Okay, and then I wrote an example of what would be a great summary of the story that includes the main events. And of course, we call this the plot. The plot is the beginning, middle, and end of the story, the main events from the beginning, middle to the end of the story. I typed up that Manu and his brothers explore a new island. The next day, they find an injured seal that Manu names Dog of the Sea Waves. Manu decides to take care of the seal until he can swim on his own. In the meantime, the brothers must work together to fix their boat so they can sail back home. Before leaving, they decide to find out where smoke is coming from on a mountain. Lava starts flowing down the mountain, so the brothers are forced to jump into the nearby sea. Afterwards, Manu almost drowns, but Dog of the Sea, should be Sea Waves, to add that in there, saves him. Okay. All right. And then I think from here on out, you guys can fill out the problem. Now, there is more than one problem in this story, so include the problems in the story. And then the resolution or solution is how the problem is solved. Okay. And then going on down to the bottom, you are to use the chart below to fill in the character traits of Manu and write down the actions that motivates his changes from the beginning to the end of the story. At the very beginning of the story, you can tell that Manu is very unhappy. He has sort of a negative attitude or a bad attitude about being here in this new land. And you can also tell that he's homesick because he says things like, "What about the pigs and the dogs and the coconuts and other fruits from his homeland?" So we can tell that he misses being there. And then by the end of the story, he has a more positive or cheerful attitude. He's ready to come back to the Hawaiian Islands where they have been all this time. He's more content meaning that he is happy with where he's at now. And of course, he even shows us a playful side whenever he enjoys playing with Doggo the Sea Waves. What actions motivate Manu to change? That means, why does he change? What motivates him or encourages him to make this change? So let's go back to the beginning of the story. In the beginning of the story, Manu complains about being on the island. He misses the fruits and animals from his homeland. After he nurses the seal back to health, he enjoys playing with him. Their friendship changes his attitude about the island. So, boys and girls, in the beginning, he doesn't have a good attitude about being there. He doesn't want to be there. But by the end of the story, he's happy with the island. He's made a friend with Dog of the Sea Waves. Dog of the Sea Waves, or the seal, saves his life, which gives them even more of a connection. And at the end of the story, he yells that they'll be back. So we know that this is a place that Manu now wants to be. And then you will, of course, complete your reading log. Today, you are to write a brief description of one of the characters in your book. Has the character changed at all? If so, describe how. So, boys and girls, here you're going to think about one of the characters, probably a main character in your book, and you're going to write about, think about the character so far in the book. Has your character changed at all? And maybe your character hasn't. Maybe so far your character has stayed the same, but tell about your character. What is your character like? Describe your character with one or two character traits and why you think that. What is it that your character says or does that leads you to that character trait? So think about that as you're reading your book or part of your book. If you're reading a chapter book, it may just be one or two chapters. And then I'll be back for your next segment for your April 22nd assignment. It's the same story, and you may want to go ahead and work on this, but it's on theme, which of course is the lesson or moral of the story. So I'll be back in the next segment for that. See you soon.